Okay, before we start our sealed system job here, one of our subscribers asked me to explain the tools that I use in my sealed system jobs, and I have my own particular way of doing things. I've been doing this for 56 years, and I think I know the shortcuts and the proper things you will need to do sealed system work, because if you're a refrigeration mechanic, or if you want to be, you're going to need to know this stuff. So we'll start at the top. This is a bag of brass fittings and couplings and process ports that I use on jobs. You can see these elbows and these sweat fittings. Look how dark they are. They've been sitting here for years. I hardly use them, but I still carry them around. Alright, so that's something. Now this is the solder that I use. This is a Harris 56% Stay Silv. This is 56% silver. It's got a really nice flow to it. I like it better than the Brazing Rods that most guys use. It's just a matter of preference, and I do have some of those rods in here, which I will get to. But this is Harris Stay Silv 56. They also make it in 45, which is okay and better than some of the other solders out there. Okay, these are filter dryers that I carry with me, because whenever you go into a sealed system, you have to change a dryer, or you're supposed to change a dryer if you're a good technician. This is a high side gauge, single manifold. These are the ones I prefer. I know most guys have the dual manifolds. I don't have the room for that. So I have this, and I also have a compound gauge in my other tool bag. This is for sealed system work. I use this when I pressurize a refrigeration system to check for leaks. All right, so this is a filter. These are filters, liquid line filters that I use if I'm working on a sealed system that has moisture in it, or maybe somebody put some chemical in there. I use these to filter the stuff out. Okay, there's two of those. This has two male fittings. This has a female and a male for different configurations. This is a short refrigeration hose with a valve on it that I use to charge the refrigerators. I'll show you that when we do our sealed system work. There are various brushes in here in different diameters. This is lock seal. It's pipe joint sealer. Never know when you need that. I have two tubing benders here, one large, and this is for really small tubing. And since I do mostly or all domestic refrigeration, there's very little need for all the larger tools, which I have, but I just don't carry them with me. And there's a couple of different size wrenches in here that I need to hook up my tank and so on and so forth. This is a striker. This is a tubing cutter. This is another tubing cutter. This is a small tool used to take out the Schrader valves on process ports. There's extra valves in there, so I have those. I also have another tool in here that I actually made. You can make out of I'll find it. These are line tap valves that I use when I tap into sealed systems and I have to take the valve off. I just use these temporarily to recover the refrigerant, and then I take them off and weld on a process port. This is a file, a small file. I just carry it in case I ever need it. You can see it's got some rust on it. It's not used that often. This is a number 3 tip for my turbo torch. I use a 5, and this is a 3 for tight spots. This is a drill bit that I use to clear out cap tubes, not cap tubes, but filter dryers. Sometimes when you unsweat a pipe, you have to ream it out so that the cap tube will go back in. That's what I use that for. This is a tool that you can use to hook up to. This is a 1/4 inch, and you tighten this. You hook this into a piece of copper tubing, like so. It goes in like that, and you tighten it up, and you don't have to use a valve. You can charge the system up, and then you can pinch it and solder it shut. That's what that tool is for. These are swag tools. These are the sizes that I carry. This is 3/16, 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8. These are the 4 that I use. And I also have another one in here, which is a straight one. Sometimes I'll use this if I'm swagging something out that's straight, but it doesn't work when you're swagging out something that's on an angle or it's bent. So that's what I use these short ones for here. I have that. I have process ports here. These are when I do jobs on systems that don't have process ports, like the newer Sub-Zeros don't come equipped with process ports. So you have to put one on, and I usually put them on after I've evacuated the system. Okay, so we have those. These here, these are aluminum clothespins. Okay, I bought these online in a package for not too much money. I actually use these as a heat sink, and it acts as a heat sink. So that's those, and these some more process ports. And here are the brazing rods that I said some guys prefer these. Okay, I like this silver stoller. Here's a roll of emery cloth. These little rubber things here come off the evaporators on Sub-Zero evaporator coils to keep the moisture out. Okay, so here's a flare tool. Now the other part of the flare tool I don't carry because I very rarely use a flare tool these days. I do have one, it's in my car, it's in a different bag, but I carry that in case I have to swag something out and lock it. So you would put the tubing in here, lock it in, and then swag it out, and that's what this tool's for. All right, I have some extra strikers in here for my striker. This is just a regular knife, handy knife, and then there's some various nuts and bolts. There's a couple of rubber mounts here that I carry, some compressors. They go on compressors, and sometimes you'll find one that doesn't have a mount on it. Okay, so that's basically it. Here's a little jeweler's saw here in case I need that. Very rare. Look, this side of the toolbox is so dark because I hardly use any of this stuff. I got an extra drill bit in here, and that's it. So that's the upper portion, and here's a couple of extra pieces of tubing that I carry just in case I have to do something. All right, so below I have a pair of heavy-duty canvas gloves here when I'm handling something hot, or even sometimes I might even use this to put on a floor or something to protect the floor from getting burnt. I also have a fireproof rod underneath. Now this is a turbo torch. Sorry you can't see the numbers on there and what model it is, but I've been using these for I don't know how many years. Longer than I can remember. And what it does is, the way it works is it uses acetylene as a gas to create the heat, but it mixes with air and creates a hotter flame. And so you can actually do some really heavy melting and soldering with this. This is the number 5 tip, and this satisfies all the uses I ever have in the refrigeration business. And the little number 3 tip is, like I say, when you have to get into a really tight spot and you want a really small frame and the tubing's not too thick, then you can use that. Now this is a pulley. I use this pulley to bend tubing. It's just one of those things you pick up over the years. This is called Thaw Zone. It's moisture control for sealed systems. And what you would do is, if you suspected that there was moisture in the system, you put a couple of drops of this and mix it in through your gauges, and that helps. It's like an antifreeze. These are soap bubbles that I use for checking leaks. This is the solder I use. The flux I use is a bright brazing flux, Harris. I believe that's Harris. Yep, that's Harris. This is a charging column. I use these exclusively to weigh the gas into the refrigeration system. This is made by Thermal Engineering, and I think that's the only company that I know of around that makes a small charging column like this. It's called a charge check. Now this, oops, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. I guess there's some Freon in there. This particular charging column made by Thermal Engineering is made for R12 and R22. Well, I can't remember the last time I used R22. Years. But they do make a charging column that has 134A and also 112. Now, R12 and 134A are pretty close to temperature pressure. So I still use the R12 scale when I'm weighing in 134A, but they do make a 134A scale. And so I'll show you how to use that when we do our compressor job. Here is an MC tank. This is a really small acetylene tank, and it lasts me for a while. You just use it, and when it's empty, you bring it back to your supplier, and he gives you another one, and he takes this one and gets this refilled. So this is acetylene. I know a lot of plumbers use the big B tanks. I don't have the room for that. I have a really small micro service car, and everything to me is miniature, because the more smaller things are, the more things I can carry. This is a piece of aluminum plate that I use to protect surfaces from getting burnt. Like, for example, if I'm putting an evaporator coiling and I'm soldering or sweating really close to the wall, I don't want to melt the insulation behind there or burn the wall. So I'll put this piece of metal in there that acts as a heat sink. And this is also a heat sink cloth, fire retardant cloth that you can use in certain situations when you're working in an area where you're using a lot of heat and soldering. For example, in some of the 700 series Sub-Zeros, where you're down by the compressor and there's a plastic coating around the whole frame of the refrigerator, you want to be careful you don't want to melt that. So I would put that and hang it over and then do my welding. And then, of course, the last but not least is my ball peen hammer. So these are the tools I use in the sealed system. So I'm going to clean up my toolbox while I have everything out, and then we will start our compressor replacement. But these are the tools, and other than this, I also have a recovery system here. It's a small recovery system. Like I say, I work on domestic refrigerators. We're not dealing with heavy amounts of Freon. I also have a 2-stage vacuum pump. I have one here in the shop. I also carry one in my car. Those are the basic refrigeration tools, other than the gauges and things you might need to do the service. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, as long as we're on the subject of tools, I'll let you also see what I carry on jobs with me, aside from my small hand bag here, which is most of my hand tools, and a headlight for my head. I use this bag when I work in the big city. I use this bag and I carry everything with me. I can put every other parts and things in here. It's because sometimes you go in these buildings and they're 50 stories high and it takes you forever to get out of them, and you have to go back to the car to get something. You get the picture. When I'm working out in the country, I just carry my little bag because I can just walk out to the car. So here's some of the things I carry. This is just a little pouch of various parts. There's some starters in here that I carry. Subco solid state starters. These are thermistors and wires and harnesses and some pieces that I made up to check things. Down here is our light switches and small bushings and things like that I use on my work. So other than that, I have a timer. I carry one defrost timer in my bag. I have an extension cord here. I have a small bag of other spare parts. I also have another extension cord over here that has an adapter on it. If I want to connect the defrost heater and run it directly to help accelerate the defrosting, I use this for that. And then I also have made this adapter that fits on that extension cord so that I can have an extra. I have a tape measurer in there. I hardly use that, but because I also have one in my handbag. So I have that, and over here I have this is a jumper wire that I use to run compressors or sealed systems or whatever, just to jump it out and bypass all the electrical. It's like a test cord. Same thing with this. I use this whenever I change a compressor. I use this cord and make sure the compressor runs and doesn't make a racket or anything like that before I put it in. Otherwise, you could wind up putting a compressor in on a job and then finish the job 2 hours later and it doesn't work. So it's just one of those things I check before I do. I also have some extra parts in here. These are brass caps for this process ports. Sometimes I go on jobs and people don't put those back on. These are more parts. These are all small parts. These are sensors and thermistors that I carry, and some clamps. Sometimes I forget where everything is because everything's so compact. Here's another bag. These are all brass fittings I carry, and it's heavy, so I leave them in this bag. There's extra T-fittings in here, and the process ports that I have. These are compression fittings, and these are shut-off valves, and just all miscellaneous pieces that I've accumulated over the years that are hardly used. That's why this bag is bulging out. This is a heat gun that I got. It's a Wagner. It's got a low and a high on it. I use this for defrosting things, or sometimes I might have to heat up my charging column to force the Freon into the system. This is a leak detector, electronic leak detector that I carry. And this is a piece of half-inch hose. Here's another piece of hose here. This is drain hose. These are for usually on Sub-Zeros. And this is 1/4-inch white plastic hose that I use sometimes to check things. So I do have rolls of 1/4-inch tubing in my car. This is just what's in my bag. This is a little breaker bar down here. I never hardly use it, but it's there. And these are Freon tanks here. What I did was I took propane tanks when they were empty, and then this one was made and bought for that purpose. This is what used to be made by GE. They had a recovery system, and this is the tank that it came with, and this is going back 20 years. And it's the same thing as a propane tank, with the exception that it already has the fitting on it, so you can. And I refill these. I put them in the freezer. I fill them up maybe to about here, and I carry them around because, like I said, I have a micro car, and I don't have the room for those big tanks. This is the same thing. This is R134A. This one I made. What I did was, of course, I made sure the tank was empty, and I drilled a 1/8 hole. I drilled a larger hole in here and put a 1/8 NPT process port, and just put some, I think I soldered it in. Looks like it's soldered in. And it still has a pressure relief on there just in case of an emergency. Sometimes you can hear there's like a little beads in there that I couldn't get out when I made it. But I've been using these, and for years I've been using these tanks, and all my techs have these in their bags. So it saves a lot of space, it saves a lot of weight. This is this is a spotlight here that I carry just in case I need a light. I also have a block of wood here for some things. Okay, and then this actually shouldn't be in my bag, it's a part. And that's it. That's basically what's here. So I also have pouches here. I have, this is a charging cord for my headlamp. There's a charging cord in here for my iPhone in an emergency. I also have a charger, an inverter box in my car, so I can charge up my phone or my headlight while I'm driving. This pouch here, I have my refrigeration gauges. This is my compound gauge. I carry 2 hoses, and we're going to be using those in a short while. Then I also have this tool here. I made this from I tapped this out and put a 1/4-inch flare process port on here, and I hook my refrigeration hose onto here, and this hooks up into my air supply, and I use this to blow out condensers, sometimes blow out drains. I also have a line tap valve in here, and I have some Allen keys and some other tools I made. Now this here tool, I showed you how, I have a video on YouTube that shows you how to make this tool. This is basically to go from an air coupler, from an air tank or an air compressor to a refrigeration hose, when I use this to either blow out drains or pressurize sealed systems to check for leaks. This tool here is just a 1/4-inch process port that I've crimped, and made into a small nozzle so that I can use this and I blow condensers out with this. There's a couple extra Allen keys here. Now I also carry an amp probe that also has the ability to check temperatures, and this is really accurate. So this is one of the cool tools. I love this tool. And also I have some WD-40. I use this sometimes to lubricate squeaky doors or squeaky fan motors. And then I also carry white silicone bathroom sealer, kitchen sealer, whatever, white silicone sealer to patch things up or seal things off. So that's about that. And on this side I have, these are sliders. I use these to put under, when I have to pull a refrigerator out, I put these underneath to protect the floor. There's 4 of them in here. There's also some small manuals for sub-zero refrigerators to check with all the codes in it so I can diagnose refrigerators properly. These are thermometers. I have bunches of these. I carry them around and I give them to my customers when they have, like the older refrigerators, they don't know what the temperature is in there, so I give these out for free. It's just like a courtesy. Here's 2 more sliders. Rubber gloves. These are no good anymore. And on one more thing on this bag, I got an extra refrigeration. This is a long hose. This is a 5-foot hose. I have some cable ties in here, and then in the back, I keep my business cards and stickers. All right, so those are my hand tools. So now you saw my refrigeration, my seal system tools, my hand tools, and so now we're going to get busy changing the compressor on our refrigerator. Okay, one more thing about tools. This is my handbag, and in my handbag, it's got several pouches on the sides. These are little small table ties. This is some extra wire I carry. This is a tape measurer, small 3/4 footer. This is a roll of Teflon tape. This is putty. And what I use this putty for is because Sub-Zero uses stainless steel screws on all their products. Most of their screws are stainless and they're not magnetic. So when you have to get into a tight spot, I put a little of this putty on the tip of my screwdriver or on the tip of the head of the screw, and I press my screwdriver into it and it sticks. And it's not messy or anything like that. So that's why I carry that putty for that. And just yesterday I had to use this. I also carry some lubricant, okay, for sometimes things have to be greased, even though most joints today or bearings are greaseless. I use this on door hinges, and also here I have another pack of Schrader valves. Okay, so these Schrader valves, because they leak, they have little nylon seals on there, and sometimes you have to change these valves when there's a Freon leak or something. So we change these valves, and it's got the little tool on the end. You can use that. I carry that. All right, so that is that corner of the bag. Now we're going to go to the other side, and there is a small screwdriver in here, stubby screwdriver that I use. I think this is made by Klein Tools, I'm not sure. Stubby multi. So what you have here is you have a Phillips and a flathead. You also have a 1/4 inch nut driver. Okay, that's one. Then you pull this out and you flip it around, and it's got another smaller Phillips head and a flathead, but a 5/16 nut driver. So you have 4 tools in one. This is very, very valuable because now I only have to carry one little stubby and I don't have to carry 2, and that helps me save space. Okay, so I think nothing else in there. Okay, let's put that back. This is a little light. Okay, an extra. This is a this is used to cut coaxial cable, and I use this to cut 1/4-inch plastic tubing, and it works great. You just score it and boom, perfectly clean cut. I use that for that. And in here I have another little small ratchet type screwdriver. Okay, it's a ratchet the other way. So, and in the back here there's a bunch of other fittings. Alright, so that's there. And I use this, not often, but I use it. Now, inside I have a little screw gun. And the reason why I use this one, it's very slow turning. It doesn't have much torque. It also has a built-in light. And I bought this at Harbor Freight Tools for 20 bucks. And every once in a while I have to charge it, but it has forward and reverse. It turns very slow, but it's good for getting into spots where you have to get screws out, and it's hard to get a screwdriver in there. This is a flathead screwdriver. I have one. Some bags of stuff. I have a couple of different kinds of wire tools. This is for cutting. This is a needle nose. This is a little brush I use for cleaning condensers. This is another small Phillips that I use sometimes when I have to pull out an ice maker. This is a syringe that I use when I want to squirt water on something, or if I want to suck water out of something, or fill an ice maker maybe. That's what I use that for. This is an 11/32 nut driver. I use this specifically for Sub-Zero because they have 11/32 nuts on the back of the thermostats, and rather than reaching in and getting a socket, I mean, it's just easier to carry that. This is a Phillips head screwdriver. That's one I use the most. This is another smaller, skinnier Phillips head, so I have 3 Phillips in there. I have these wire cutters, and basically I use this tool to crimp refrigeration lines when I want to seal them off, or I use it to crimp on wire terminals. And it's also, I can cut with this. This is a magnetic tool. Okay, it's got a little magnet on the end of it. If I have to pick something up or get into some tight spot, as long as it's not a Sub-Zero tool, I'll be able to pick it up. Because a Sub-Zero screw, rather, they're all stainless. Wire cutters, okay. Electrical tester, 120 volts. This is very common. I use this a lot. These are some small little cheap tools I bought from Harbor Freight that for just getting at things that you can't reach. For example, on the back panel of a Sub-Zero, you could take the screws out and you can't get your fingers to the side to pull it out. You get this and you stick it behind it and it'll pull it out. Here's an inspection mirror that I use. This is another kind of a pocket knife. This is a small awl. It's got a sharp point on. I use this to poke things. This is a 5/16 nut driver, a long one. And I also have a 1/4 inch in here somewhere. Well, I did. Hope I didn't leave it anywhere. Alright, here's another flathead screwdriver. This is a little larger than the last one. Oh, here's the 1/4 inch nut driver. It's in my hand. Okay, so another tool. This one actually had an angle to it and it broke on me, so that's why I bought these 2 things, these little pickers. And I have a little mini Phillips. There's small screws. I have a little channel locks. These are condenser combs to straighten out the fins on the condenser. I only use one of these because I use the 1 inch the most. That's the one Sub-Zeros, because I do a lot of Sub-Zero. And that's what those are for. This is a jumper wire, so when I want to jump out a water valve and not have to take the whole darn machine apart, I just hook this up to the water valve and check to see if the water valve works. Here's a little tiny flathead. Here's a stem thermometer that I use. I don't use these things much anymore, but sometimes I do. This is a roll of black electrical tape. This is another jumper wire for jumping out a defrost thermostat to check the heater. There's a little piece of 1.5 inch hose I use sometimes when I have to blow out a drain. And this is another one of those jumper wires that look like they came apart. So, alright, so now the rest, and this is another jumper. These are for the old ice makers that had the 4 prongs in the side wall. What I would do is I would pull the ice maker out and push this in there to test the water valve. I haven't used this in probably 15 years. So other than this other garbage and junk that has fallen down in the bottom of my tool bag, which gives me a good opportunity to clean it out right now. However, a couple more things. This tool here is for removing the fittings, terminals inside here. You push this in and then it loosens it, and then you can pull the wire out. And I use that often sometimes. So that's what this tool, it's made by, I think it's made by Waytech. Molex extraction tool. Okay, that's that. Some various pieces of things that, you know, when I find stuff I want to save, I just throw it in my toolbox. And every once in a while when I clean out my toolbox, I put them where they're supposed to be. So that's what I'm going to do now. One more thing here, I have a couple of jumper wires. Now I use this jumper wire here to jump out an ice maker sometimes to get it going. So I use these jumper wires, and then this one here I use when I want to check a thermostat, and I would plug these 2 wires into the power wires for the thermostat, and if the compressor came on, I would know that the thermostat was bad. Alright, and that's about it. A couple extra pieces and screws in here. Like I said, I just throw everything in here and clean it out every once in a while. Okay, those are all my hand tools, and let's get started. Oh, by the way, one more thing. I got a bag of screws and bolts and nuts in here. Just various things I save over the years in case I need an extra screw, and that comes in handy. I also have another bag here of electrical terminals, wire connectors, spade terminals, and extra wire. All this stuff is all for electrical work. Okay, you got that, and then we have wire nuts. I have small and large wire nuts in there for doing electrical work. I also have a bag here of tools. I have, empty this out here. I have sockets, a little 1/4 inch ratchet set, extension, some open end wrenches. I use these a lot when I'm working on the water valves and water lines. I have extra fittings here for nuts and bolts, and I have, this is a fitting I use. I made this also. I'm going from a compression fitting to a refrigeration hose, and I'll hook this up to a CO2 tank and blow out a water line, or reverse blow out a line. That's what I use that for. I've got some step drills and regular drills and Allen keys. I have a 5/8, a 9/16, and I have 2 halves and 1 7/16. I have an extra tubing cutter in here, drill bits, and this is a refrigeration wrench for, I use this side for the MC tank, and you can also use these for service valves on heavier equipment, like commercial equipment uses these a lot, and every once in a while I will do a job for somebody in commercial. And just, you know, various tools, sockets and things like that for getting things done. So that is pretty much the bulk of all the tools I use to do service calls and fix refrigerators. So there is one other thing that I just recently got, because you never know when you're going to need something, and I got a little carried away here because I have a lot of things that double that I don't need, but I have them anyway. This right here, this kit, by the way, this is an extension for the drill gun, the number 10 star key on there, but I just bought this whole kit here for, I don't know, 10, 20 bucks. It has these extended fittings here. It's for getting into tight spots, and they fit into my screw gun. So we also have the small ones in here like these, but sometimes you need a longer one. So I bought this whole setup here. This was another one of those Harbor Freight tool things, and the only one that looks dirty is the one I was using. I don't know if that was where that was. Looks like it. Okay, that seems to be the bulk of all my tools. That goes there. Obviously this came out of its pouch. This also comes with a ratchet screwdriver, which I don't carry because I already have one. Alright, that's it. I'm going to clean up my tool bag and then get started on replacing a compressor.